next is the config menu, which configures various parts of the synthesizers and also general operation sequencer. So in order to access the config menu, you press Start, and then you would push up on the D-pad to get to config, and push to the right. And you have 5 options: freak mode, stereoize, humanize, loop jump, and record location. Freak mode is used to select whether a pitched generator uses standard 12-tone tuning for frequency values, or if you're allowed to set any frequency you want. I also refer to 12-tone tuning as MIDI tuning. You can tell which way an instrument is configured by looking at the value in the freak parameter at the top of the sequencer screen. If it's a letter and a number combo, for example E3, then it uses MIDI tuning, and the frequency is the fourth, and this means that the frequency is the 4th octave of E, which is around 82 Hertz. If the freak value is just a number, then the track is set for absolute frequencies. So if I go back to the sequencer and push X, you can see that BAM0 is configured for setting absolute frequencies because the freak value is 480. So now I'm going to go back and select freak mode. So if I push Start, up on the D-pad, select config, select freak mode, you have a list of all the tracks in the song. So you can go through this list by pushing up or down on the D-pad, and you notice that it skips past all of the generators that don't have a frequency component. So it skips past all of the N SVF generator and effects combinations because N is a noise generator and doesn't have any frequency value set for it. So the proper choice of freak mode depends on the type of music you want to make and the instrument you're working with. If you want instruments that are easy to keep in tune and quick to compose melodic music with, you should choose MIDI tuning. If you're interested in more experimental music and need complete control over the frequency values, then absolute tuning is the way to go. For pitched instruments which are not being used for melodic purpose, I generally use absolute frequency values. An example of an instrument that is used for this purpose is the BAM generator, which is configured to create a kick drum sound. So like BAM0 is set up to sound like a kick drum, and I use an absolute frequency value for that. So in order to actually change the freak mode, I would select BAM0, and then you can see that it comes up with the default as ABS. You push up and down on the D-pad, you can choose between ABS and MIDI. So if I select MIDI by pressing H, now you can see that the freak value is set to C0, and this means that it's now in MIDI tuning. And if I push triangle and push up on the D-pad, now you can see that we're setting a frequency value which is a letter and a number, as opposed to a number, which is the absolute frequency. So the next option under the menu system for config is stereoize, and what this does is applies a stereo effect to a track. Earlier I've said that every track in PSPSeq is mono, and assuming that if the pan value is 50, then the same output is generated for the left and right tracks. What stereoize does is it inverts the output of one of the channels to trick your ear into thinking the sound is different in the left and right channels. This effect works better on some instruments than others, and with some speaker setups than others. I wouldn't recommend using this effect for bass notes, especially if your speakers are facing towards each other, as the waveforms can cancel each other out. It's much more convincing on high-pitched, noisier sounds like hi-hats and snare drums. Also, it works better when it's used sparingly and when there's multiple instruments that are playing simultaneously. Pretty much I can just say, try stereoize on different tracks and see how you think it sounds, and if you want to keep it in there. The way to actually configure stereoize is by selecting it by pushing right on the D-pad, selecting the instrument you want to stereoize, and then pushing up or down to turn it off or on. I'll turn it on for BAM0, but it's going to be hard to hear because of the audio quality through YouTube. You won't be able to hear the difference. But if you're listening on headphones, then you would definitely be able to hear the difference. Okay, so the next option under config is humanize. And what humanize does is it adds a little bit of randomness to when the audio output envelope triggers. So if I select humanize, again I'm given the list of all tracks that I want to apply a humanize parameter to. So I'll select bam 0. And then you're given humanize percentage. What you do is you push up or down with the analog or digital pad. So I'll make humanize very large, set it to around 20. And I'll trigger some hits in this track. And it might be a little hard to hear for this specific example, but what's happening is that the audio output envelope is being delayed by a random amount. Generally, I would only set this to a very small value, and it sort of just gives some tracks a little bit of an interesting character to them. So the next option under config is loop jump. And loop jump determines whether or not pressing the left and right triggers in the sequencer causes the sequencer to immediately jump to the next measure, or if it waits until the current measure finishes playing before jumping to a new loop. This feature is most useful for manually controlling loop sequences in PSPSeq if you're using it to play live music. So if I select loop jump, you're given the choice to set the instant loop switch to off or on. And when it's on, when you push the left or right triggers, PSPSeq immediately jumps to a new loop when you're pushing the left and right triggers. And if you turn it off, which I'll do now, it waits to the end of the loop before jumping to a new loop. So if I set it to off and push X, now I'm going to push the right trigger a few times. So I pushed it 4 times. So now what happened is that it finished playing loop 0 entirely, and then it went to loop 4. And if you looked on the bottom of the screen, you'll have seen that the number at the bottom of the screen is gray. So I'm going to go back to loop 0 now. I'll wait for it to finish playing. Now I'm pushing the left trigger 4 times, and now I'm back to loop 0 again. And now it starts, it loads loop 0 after loop 4 is done playing. So you can also do combinations of left and right trigger jumps. So I could push the left trigger a few times, and then I could push the right trigger a few times. And they're all added up together. So I'm going to go back to setting instant loop jump to on for the rest of the tutorial. So I'll set that to on. So now I'm going to go back to config, and the last option is record location. And record location sets where PSPSeq saves loops and songs that are recorded as WAV files. So if I select this, actually record location isn't enabled in the PC version, but what happens is that you're given the option to choose whether or not you want to record music to record WAV files to the PSP/music directory, or to the location on the memory stick where the PSP is expecting audio files to be stored. I think that's the the PSP music directory, or to the WAV directory of PSPSeq. If you save it to the WAV directory of PSPSeq, then those WAV files are available for usage within the WAV player. And if you choose to set it to the PSP music directory, then they're available to be used within the audio player on the PSP. And the reason why you would do this is if you want to play music recorded in PSPSeq outside of PSPSeq, the audio player used on the PSP uses less processing power than PSPSeq, so you don't use the battery so rapidly if you're playing music back in that fashion.